In this video, we're going to kind of do a quick introduction to interfaces and walk through a simple example. I'm going to assume that you've actually gone through the lecture material, so you at least kind of read or know a little bit about what an interface is. So I'm going to start by just creating a very simple interface. So I'm going to do public interface. Now you'll notice that we're not doing public class, okay? So this is the first time we've done anything besides a class. This is going to be called an interface, and we give it a name just like we would anything else. So I'm going to call this interface movable, all right? And the point of this interface is going to be to prescribe a bunch of methods that you would allow or that you would impose on some sort of object that you want to be able to move. So we'll have we'll just have a public void move method, okay? So with interfaces, basically what we're doing is we're defining a collection of methods that whatever implements the interface will have to implement, okay? So we'll start out with just maybe a single method, public void move, okay? So this interface doesn't necessarily do anything. All it does is just prescribe that whoever uses this interface has to implement this move method. All right, so I can compile this and all right, and you'll see that it compiles just fine, and there we are. All right, now that I've created this movable interface, now I'm going to create a class that actually uses it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my shape example. So we will do public class shape. Okay, and now in order for this class to use an interface, I use the implements keyword, so public class shape implements, and then I put down the name of the interface that I want to use. Okay, so public class shape implements movable. Okay, now if I were to try and compile this after I save it, what you'll see is that the compiler complains at me and says, shape is not abstract and does not override abstract method move in movable. Okay? So basically what this means is that because I have this interface movable and I have declared this method public void move, okay? Notice there's no curly braces, it's just the semicolon. In shape, because I said that I'm implementing movable, that means I have to provide an implementation of this method, okay? My program won't even compile unless I do that. So I have to go in here and I have to put in a public void move, all right? And I could, put in whatever I want, system.out.println. I am moving, whatever, okay? And so this is an example of how you would actually use this interface that is created. So if I were to save, or if I were to compile this, you'll see now that it compiles just fine. Okay? Now the cool thing about interfaces is unlike inheritance with superclasses and subclasses, right? So you remember if we go back to our inheritance example, if I wanted to extend shape, right? So let's say that I wanted to create a circle class. So if I did public class circle, I could extend shape like this, okay? In Java, I am only allowed to extend one class, okay? So in other words, a subclass can only have one superclass, all right? Other programming languages like C++, you can have multiple superclasses, but in Java, a subclass can only have one superclass. So circle could extend shape, it cannot extend anything else. With interfaces, okay, what I can do, I can actually implement multiple interfaces, okay? So let's briefly show what that means. So if I was to, I'm going to make this a public interface, and maybe we'll just call this deletable, okay? And in here we'll have a public void delete, okay? And again, because this is an interface, we're not actually providing any kind of implementation. All we're saying is that anybody who uses this method needs to provide this delete method, okay? So I can compile this deletable interface, okay, and it compiles just fine. All right, and now if I go back here to my shape, I can say that not only does it implement movable, I can put in a comma and say deletable, okay? So now my shape is going to implement both the movable interface, which requires that I define this method, and it's going to implement the deletable interface, which requires that I implement this method, okay? So now that I've said that I'm implementing both movable and deletable, if I compile this, you'll see, again, now it's complaining because it's saying shape does not override the abstract method delete in deletable. Okay, so I need to now provide an implementation for delete. So I would do public void delete. Okay, and deleting something, whatever. Okay. All right, and so now my shape method will compile. Okay, so you can see that what I've done is I've created this interface that prescribes one method. I've created a second interface that prescribes a second method, and then I've basically created an object which implements both of these methods. Now this class is just a normal class in that it could be a subclass, it could be a superclass. You can also implement these methods, and this is a way that Java kind of provides sort of like a multiple inheritance kind of situation. It's not really multiple inheritance, it's instead multiple interfaces, but later on we'll see some examples of how this can be used to your benefit. So that's the basic example for now, and in future videos we're going to show some other interesting things that you can do with interfaces.